This is an Aztec-inspired sci-fi 3D Metroidvania that I worked on the music for, and I ended up having to write all of the music before we had any of the levels down or any of the visuals down, so I was just working off of tone and concepts. The main constraints for this were just time. We only had a few weeks to work on this, and all of us were busy. I have a newborn baby. I had virtually no time to spend on this, so I was just trying to take any moments I can and get as much done as I possibly could for this. So that was the real challenge. I did a couple small sound design elements for this game, but my role on this was mostly just the music. This really just got me excited because of this combination of sci-fi elements and some maybe traditional Aztec Mayan type of instruments. And as soon as I heard about this sort of theme for this combo, this hybrid collection of sonic elements from my end, I got really excited about trying to take some of these more traditional like flute type instruments and maybe put them into different context with some synthesizers or some more sci-fi type elements, or to maybe re-synthesize them and do some cool things to maybe make them sound kind of like they come from something organic, but they've been aged into the future or something like that. It was a cool opportunity to try to make something that I wouldn't have made before. I was really just trying to have this sort of hybrid identity between this organic Aztec thing and the synthetic sci-fi synthesizer type of sound to make sure we have the feel of this and the sort of setting to be locked in sonically too, as well as visually. So we had some concept art that we were working off of and a few different ideas that we had for areas, and really my musical elements were really just trying to take those ideas and turn them into maybe some distinct areas that have a slightly different emotional tone and really would just be identifiable for the player when they walk in. Because this is a Metroidvania, you're kind of coming at these areas from ways that you would not expect at certain points. So one of the things that's really cool on my end is being able to have that music come back. This first area, the prison, is really just kind of a tutorial area for the player, but I wanted it to open kind of lonely and spark curiosity in a sort of Dark Souls way where you're not sure what's going on. The music is just telling you like that everything is empty and you have to figure out where you're going and what to do, and there's just lots of stuff that you see and you can't interact with yet. And what the music really ends up conveying is that it's just empty, that it's abandoned, that you're pretty much the sole explorer left. One of the coolest moments for me was to be able to have this thematic moment here where we step out and we see for the first time this minimalist statue, this giant guy, which we're gonna see later. There's a whole musical theme for that area where we see those guys. But here we get this reduced, slowed down solo flute version with these little bass flute yips in there too. There's just this identifiable sort of sound palette that is for that particular area, that particular figure in this game. And this is a cool chance to introduce it thematically, to have this little tease that happens first. And then you get the payoff later when you see it for real. And really here what I get to do is play with the player's memory and recognition and tie a sound to this character, to this figure, to this part of the game. The next area that we enter is this tunnels zone, where we still have this sort of ambient tension where we're kind of waiting for something to happen. But now the flavor has sort of changed to this more synth-focused, long, drawn-out thing going on. The temple is really where we spent a lot of the time visualizing. This was sort of our centerpiece for what we wanted the game to feel like and look like and sound like. So we have this moment where we walk up this ramp and have this step out moment. We get to see this big temple, the stars in the background, this big void underneath. And my job here musically was to build some anticipation. This is kind of a big moment in this game. So as you're walking up, the music starts and you have this sort of Aztec-inspired but churning, bristling, growing swell into this area that is going to really tell you that this is something significant. This is like a centerpiece for this game. This is something important. We haven't really heard anything yet that is this full of a track, this big of a song, and that helps to convey the gravity of this particular area. We're really playing with the restraint versus the spectacle here, where the beginning is kind of all restraint. There's all of these themes, but they're all sort of buttoned up. And now this is the first time where it gets to actually open up and have a full theme. And this next forest area is where we actually get to see these giant minimalist statues, and there's lots of verticality going on here. And we hear that theme again, but this time with the full flute choir that ended up being here. We've got this kind of interesting 6/4 but grouped into odd groupings thing going on here, where it doesn't really feel super stable and it kind of seems foreign sounding, especially with some of these little bass flute yips that come back in here. I ended up taking those bass flute little yips and resynthesizing them and using them as a more chordal interjection thing for the more ambient part of this track. One of the things that I ended up doing, because I really wanted some of these areas to be identifiable, and you walk in and you have this moment of arrival, and the music tells you that. But you're going to probably be spending a decent amount of time in some of these areas, so you don't want that track just on loop. So we have this entrance track to let you know you've arrived, and then we have a more ambient version that uses some of the same elements and themes and instruments, but is not exhausting for the player or for the listener. If I had more time on this, I would probably try to add a little bit more to some of the ambience of the tracks. I've noticed, I've been playing through this a little bit, and some of the repeats are just more than I would like. And with the limited time and scope and everything, actually the big scope and limited time, there was only so much we could put in. But I would prefer to have a little bit more variation for these longer sections. I think if I had more time, I would like to have some more like dynamic layers for the music. Maybe something like as the main character is losing her pieces of armor and gaining abilities, maybe some of these musical themes would return in a reduced form to signify the armor that's lost, or maybe with a little bit more full versions. With the amount of time that we had and the amount of areas and music and gameplay elements, this wasn't possible, but something like that would be cool. Musically, for me, this whole game really ended up being about tone, about having a really recognizable sonic identity, instrumental identity, and about restraint, about kind of making the player wait, making the listener wait for some of those big moments, teasing them, having some more subtle things, having tension. If you're working on something with a strong atmosphere or world building components, this is the kind of thing that I love trying to work on, and that inspires me to do things that I wouldn't have thought of otherwise. Thanks for watching. I'm probably going to do more of these for some other games that I've worked on in the future, so stay tuned.